Oh man. So yeah. Pushed my stream back half an hour, figuring I'll leave at this time. I'll have like an hour of traffic. That'll make sure I have plenty of time to get the stream ready. 2 minutes before I'm about to shut all my stuff down and walk out, my boss is like, high priority, need this. I'm like, fine. I got here 4 minutes ago. So needless to say, I rushed getting everything set up, but what do you do? Such is the life in contract servitude. Sounds wrong, but that's kind of what I've have myself in now for work. But let's see. So give it a few minutes, let folks get in here. I'll grab a couple of things. I wonder if Billy was streaming live from his car on his way to Keystone Clash. I'm not going to Keystone Clash, buddy. Sorry. One, not in the budget. Two, well, we'll just have to say that work wouldn't allow that either. So my work, because we have a bunch of like high priority stuff right as I started, it was basically like, hey, you can't take tiny time off for your first 90 days. And then by the time your first 90 days are over, we'll be in crunch time. So we'd really like you not to take any time off. It's like, cool. Unless it's an emergency, no taking time off. Although, I am trying to figure out what I'll do next year. As long as everything stabilizes and life gets back to normal, like what kind of convention I'll do next year. I don't know whether I'll do Aquashella or maybe just go to Keystone Clash again. I'm not really sure. I want to do something. I'd like to do something I haven't done before, but I got to figure out what's what and what will work. And then Uncle Smiley, I'll answer your question real fast before I get into my topic. Have I ever grown cryptocorine pet shy? Yes. It's in the very front kind of center of my guppy mansion. So you don't necessarily see it a whole ton because you're probably like focused on all the stuff in the back. It's like huge and interesting, or the fish, of course. But I have grown quite a bit of crypt pet shy. I think I've specifically done pet shy pink, which doesn't really get pink unless you put a lot of CO2 in it and a whole lot of light. But pet shy is pretty easy. It's like any crypt. Just make sure you have iron and you're relatively stable on your water conditions. What all crypts don't like is they don't like really swingy water parameters, especially big swings in temperature. And they don't really like having no iron available. They're a pretty iron hungry plant. So that would be something like adding iron supplementation to your substrate makes it super easy. So like a laterite, or, there's the laterite powder. There's a lot of like laterite based or laterin additive substrates that you can get out there. Like Brightwell has a couple of different products in their line. It's all their like substrat laterin that are all great to mix in if you're doing a really crypt heavy tank. We did that with like Fallen Forest as an example. And I'll do some other versions of that in some other tanks that are going to have a bunch of crypts, just to kind of help make sure that they're as happy as can be. All right, I want to get on topic, and then we'll go into larger questioning. Okay, never mind. I'll get this one from Anna real fast. Sea Chase Shark Advance is on clearance at Petco. Is the Pro version good enough to be 4 times the price of the Advance on sale? Okay. So I like Sea pumps, but I don't necessarily prescribe to certain people, we know who we're talking about, who think that like Sea is the best thing in the world. And a lot of the sharks, the internal filters, I'm not super big on internal filters in general. However, they do have a place when you're dealing with something where you don't want a full-on hang on the back or canister filter. And in the case of something where you have a clearance product versus a 4 times the price, I don't think anything is worth 4 times the price unless you're doing it for alternative reasons. And what I would say that is like, you could get a relatively inexpensive canister filter, or you could spend a significant amount of money and get something that will really be very effective long term. As an example, think like the FX6, right, where we're spending $350 or so for a filter, or like that F Zone Fancy Boy, the Astra Stream, the one that's all steel. There is some benefit to those just because of the duration of time that they last compared to cheaper versions of a canister filter that are out there. And sometimes it is worth the investment in that kind of route. But I think when you're looking at like two filters that are really similar, spending 4 times the price, are you getting enough feature difference to you to be worth that kind of money? And to me, I would say no in the case of CJ Sharks. But yeah, that's me. I'm not too big on internals in general, so I naturally have kind of a bias, but I do see their purpose and use. So I hope that helps, Anna. Okay, let me get on the topic. So I went to FishtoberFest, and I took all my camera gear and basically did no filming. I did a really short video like on my cell phone, but I didn't get time to prep it, which was basically just like panning through the vendor room. And last year, so it's at the same location it was last year, although the particular hotel has undergone a bunch of changes, and it is a little older. And it was a Shiloh Inn. Now it's like a Sojourn Suites, and it's apparently going to change again. But there's a new owner that bought it a little while back, and they're going to be relatively soon doing a bunch of renovations. So it should be nice. But that should tell you if they need to do a bunch of renovations, it's not in the best of shape. I mean, it's not like falling apart, but you definitely can see it's a relic compared to other hotels in the area. Now, that all being said, they actually do have this nice kind of convention space that is a little separated down at the very end of the hotel. So there's a benefit in that you're not like in the main lobby or anything like that. So that's kind of nice. And as one thing is being said, there were less vendors this year, and that particular hotel kept the convention space open just for FishtoberFest. And I got some kind of like behind the scenes information about the last event they had done there and stuff like that through some of the Greater Portland Aquarium Society's leadership. And basically like a quinceañera had happened beforehand, and after the quinceañera, the people who held the quinceañera basically just like left all their trash there, didn't clean it all, and just walked away. And as the ownership change happened, needless to say, that place got really bad. Now, thankfully, the staff that worked there did a phenomenal job getting it cleaned and getting it ready for FishtoberFest, because apparently they were telling, like, when they did a walkthrough, it smelled like stale alcohol and all sorts of stuff. So it was not doing so well. But we didn't have any of those problems at FishtoberFest, which is very nice. Now, one of the benefits to this year in the fact that they had a few less vendors is that, and I think for those who've been around, you'll remember I complained about this last year. It was really claustrophobic in the vendor room because there was just so many tables and they were all jammed together. And there were several places where there were very, very thin aisles where if you had two people basically looking at opposite tables back to back, there was really no room between to move. And in this case, they kind of did a central island of tables instead of a several rows, and then a kind of an outside ring. And that left a lot of really good room to move around. It made sure that each of the vendors had space behind their tables, like the vendors weren't jammed on top of each other in their tables as well. And overall, it just made the room feel a little more relaxed and less like claustrophobic. And I say claustrophobic because I'm not a person who is claustrophobic, but last year I felt it. I just felt everything really jammed together. It was hard to kind of move around. Now, granted, I'm a big guy, right? So that's, oh, I see my internet as being a problem. Yeah, this is exactly what I need, internet, at the same time that we're doing all these things. Thank you. Thank you. So anyway, with this problem being resolved, that was one of the big benefits, is that they had more room and moving around was easy. And also where the previous speaker room, so you had like the vendor room, which is like two rooms without the dividers, right? And then behind that last year was a third room where the speakers were. They didn't do that this year. Instead, the third room, and it did keep a little dividing wall in place, but that was where they had all of the saltwater vendors. So there were a few saltwater vendors who were there. They tried to abduct John Ebsen, who's in chat, and convert him to the dark side. It's pretty funny. If you walk back there, they were like super interested in talking to all us freshwater nerds and trying to convert us into coral, being like, oh, it's really not that different. You just do this. And when you want to do coral, you start with soft corals, man. You don't have to do any of the crazy dosing. It's easy. Like, they were definitely working their mojo trying to convert us freshwater people. But all very, very nice people. Pretty great. And the fact that they had a dedicated saltwater section was nice. So for the people who were there, who were both freshwater and saltwater, you got to kind of go through both. And instead of being like interspersed everywhere, you had a dedicated saltwater area so you could chill out and meet all the saltwater folks, and then dedicated freshwater area. And if you think about it, like the amount of space garnered was something like 70% freshwater and about 30% saltwater. So still a reasonable representation, considering that the primary portion of the Greater Portland Aquarium Society and a lot of the Oregon hobbyists in general is freshwater. So there's one part. They had a separate room just a little bit down the hall that was for the speakers. And other than like, I think we needed some slightly better signage to indicate where speakers were, but this happens at a lot of places. The room was great. It was a nice big long room, lots of open seating, but not such a big room to where the speakers had to like struggle to be heard. And I only attended one talk because I kind of got clogged up in my time getting there, because I left Saturday morning and I arrived at like, I think it was like 3 p.m., 2:30 p.m., because I had to help my dad in the morning. It took a little longer than I thought it was going to take, but needless to say, I got there for the talk I wanted to go to, which was Dr. Mazeral's talk, where he went over the kind of the who, what, when, where, and why, and how of what the Amazon Research Center for Ornamental Fishes does. And while I know what they do, it's still fun to sit there. And maybe the funnest part, and this might sound silly, but so Dr. Mazeral has recently moved to Oregon with his wife, right? And his wife, Renee, who's also one of the board members for the Amazon Research Center, was in the room. And like anytime he would get a detail not perfectly accurate, she would kind of butt in and correct him. And it was kind of hilarious because they had this very fun back and forth between each other of adding details, making sure that she kind of kept Dr. Maz in check. It was pretty hilarious, honestly. And I doubt I'm the only one who enjoyed it, just in the sense of a lot of good nature from Dr. Mazeral, like occasionally looking up to her and be like, did I get that one right? You know, just kind of playing with it some and having fun. But there were a number of good talks. So Lawrence Kent, who's from my club, but has traveled like all over the world collecting fish, he had a talk. I probably should have gone and watched it just because he's so entertaining. But it was one of those things where I was like, he's talking on Sunday and I want to leave early on Sunday to actually get home at a reasonable hour, because with the amount of time I'm working now, I get a lot less time with my wife. So it's kind of like, I don't want to lose an entire weekend with my wife and my dogs. I don't want to get yelled at. I wouldn't really get yelled at, but you know what I mean? Just kind of make sure everything's okay. I realize my phone's like still sitting in my pocket and it's bugging me. But so there's that. The other talk that I think was really warranted. I know that regular eavesdropper in live streams with my good friend Alyssa Bentley went to Pleco Barbie's talk. So Barbie Fiorentino. I really hope I pronounced her last name correctly. I feel like every time I see it differently and pronounce it wrong. But she's well known in the hobby. especially when it comes to Ancistrus and some of like the hype Ancistrus plecos, but she's bred tons of stuff. Obviously, you don't get the nickname Pleco Barbie without being pretty good at plecos. But she gave a talk that I heard nothing but positive comments about. And then, of course, I got to see a lot of my friends. So that's kind of all the goods. Let's talk about the bad, right? Because there are some bads. So the big bad kind of for me last year was the placement of just how condensed the vendor room was. And because of that, the speaker room was on the back of the vendor room, and it actually made a lot of noise, making it hard to hear the speakers. So that got fixed, which is phenomenal. I think that might be one of the best things, is that you don't have kind of the noise of the vendor room clogging up the speaker talks. Big positive, big fix from last year. However, what I would say is one of the things that FishtoberFest can learn from the Clash, especially, but there's lots of other events that are out there. The vendor room basically just shut down at 6 p.m. and there were really no events planned in the evening. So it was kind of intended more like you come in, you visit the vendor room, maybe you go to a couple talks, and then you leave, because there's kind of an almost assumption in the way things are scheduled is that you probably live relatively local. Now, granted, on the night I was there, a big group of us all went out to this local brewery place that has a bunch of food trucks out front, so you can get food and then sit down in their kind of common area. And if you want to have a beer, you can have a beer. And we all just sat and BS'd for quite a while before retiring to our rooms. That was great. But I think one thing that they can improve on, my dog is playing with a puzzle toy, so if you hear it in the background, I'm sorry. But I think one thing that can be improved on, and kind of take a little lesson from looking at maybe some of the scheduling in the Clash, is have something, even if it's not having the vendor room open, but have something in the evening that draws people in. So like, as an example, at the Clash, later in the day is when they did the panel talks. So you usually have kind of a break between all the standard talks where you could get dinner or something, and then that's when the panels would occur in the room where like all of the like fish show competition stuff was happening, and like the aquascapes. So you could walk around, look at some of those things, and then go attend the panel talk. The panel talks would usually go for hour and a half or so, maybe longer. It just depended. They were pretty open and freeform, letting the panel and the crowd kind of engage as long as they wanted. I mean, granted, going at least an hour, but I think ours went for like the Rainbow Fish panel talk went for like an hour and 40 minutes or something like that. I mean, it's quite a bit, and it was fun, right? I think that's something that FishtoberFest could learn from, is try to find something to schedule in the evening after the vendor room shuts down, so that for the people who have traveled in, or maybe just some of your late arrivals, have some other things they can do if they missed some of the stuff earlier in the day, like some of the talks. And you can do small stuff. It doesn't have to be anything super formal, right? It doesn't have to be huge. I think, as an example, with the Clash, right, those panel talks are great because there are people who attended them. There are people who just went off and visited like a bar, or did like sing-alongs or things like that. I think some kind of relaxed event, even if it's just like there's an open room with a bunch of snacks and beverages. The other thing that the Clash does is they have their hospitality room opens at a certain time, and it's a great opportunity for everybody who's present to go sit around and socialize, have a beverage, whether that is alcoholic or not. As an example, all these things are great. There wasn't a hospitality room at FishtoberFest. I think part of that is just budget, right? Their budget is a lot different because my 2-day pass, I think, was like $15 or something. It was cheap. But, trying to account for something like that, just to encourage extra social activity amongst all of us inherent fish nerds, right? Where might not be the most social people. But, things like that, like, you don't necessarily have to have, say, panel talks. As Scotty is mentioning this year, they're not doing the panel talks, but they do have their hospitality room. But, things like that where you could have some kind of open social area outside of just people figuring it out on their own. I think that would be a good thing to help Fishtoberfest feel closer to a larger event rather than just kind of like a vendor room with some talks. Not that that's a bad thing. I want to be very clear. Vendor room with some talks and because a lot of us are just sitting around socializing anyway. But I still think there's opportunity to add kind of value add, if you will. This is a value add for people who might be traveling in, because there were a number of people who came up from California. There are several people like myself who came down from Washington. And rather than doing something where it's like, oh, come down for the day and then, it's evening, I might just go home, or I'm basically going to retire to my hotel room and leave the next morning, it creates something else for those people to do, and might also add a little bit extra just interest to the event to maybe get a few more people to travel, right? How was the vendor room this year? It bigger and better flow, definitely. I kind of covered that, but I'll cover it really briefly. Basically, instead of like being really jammed together, they had the room where the speakers were last year was also part of the vendor room, so it let it spread out a bit. There were a few less vendors this go around too, so it kind of opened it up, made a lot more room. Way, way better this go around. But, as they grow, it'll be something they have to consider, because there's only so much space where they're going currently. And it'll depend, because that whole hotel's getting renovated. So it might not be it might not be affordable anymore afterward. Hopefully it stays affordable, because it's actually a pretty nice space, but we'll see. And then I think that's really, I would say, the only bad part. Other than, like, you have to go into that natural understanding that it is a smaller show. Right? So being a smaller show, you're not going to have quite as much crazy nonsense going on, but they still could schedule something to add a little bit in the evening, so it's not just kind of like, well, the streets roll up at 6, figure it out. Right? I think that's the biggest opportunity to kind of increase the value and interest of the event. What are you doing, puppy? You're being so weird. And we can get to the ugly. The ugly part might be impossible to fix, to be honest. And maybe it isn't, but because of the nature of it being a smaller club trying to host an event, cost is a thing. So the ugly part is kind of just the fact that it was an older hotel that it needs some love. But did it really impact like the vendor spaces or anything like that? No. I think where the biggest impact is, and this would be something that I think over time, as they continue doing the event, especially if the event grows, the other kind of ugly part is in the case of the speakers, and I saw this specifically with Dr. Mazerol, the tech that's present is pretty limited. They have a projector, but that projector is not so capable of dealing with Macs, as an example. And some people, Dr. Mazerol was an example, have a Mac as their main machine. And when you can't interface with the projector, that they kind of struggled to get a big enough image in focus. It took a little bit of fiddling with to get it right. That would be one of the things that we fixed. Now, granted, this is the same equipment that they use for their meetings, and it's not really, they don't have a history of doing several conventions or maybe projecting on a larger space, where like Clash does, and a lot of your big presentation, your Aquashellas, when they have speakers, of course, they're going to have much more significant equipment to do that. Or at least I would hope so. But I mean, that's like kind of the ugly, and I think this is like nitpicking. I want to be really clear in that the uglies are very small things where there are opportunities to grow. But it is under the understanding that like their club only has so much funds to put the event on for now. Now, as it continues to grow, hopefully it'll help make it easier to either expand into nicer or larger, possibly both spaces, or look at things like equipment upgrades to where they can make it more interesting and add more and more. Because there are like, that space does have additional room, so it would be potential to where like the freshwater room might take up the whole area, including where the saltwater guys were this time. You'd have a separate room for saltwater and then another room for speakers, as an example. You easily could pull that off at that same location, assuming it stays reasonably affordable and get the big upgrades that have been planned from what we've heard from their staff. But that's it. That's kind of Fishtoberfest in a nutshell. I have a few things that I will be, because of Fishtoberfest, showing off relatively soon. So for those who recall, Hector, does Hector's Everything, which is that powdered fertilizer I showed. He has a couple other new products that he's been working on that are really awesome. They're basically designed to make it really easy to have a clip-on immersed plant growth basket that just clips onto your tank. And he's done some really genius kind of engineering work with some friends of his that are kind of co-opting together to do this little business venture. And I have one demo unit downstairs that I'm going to set up, and then there's a different version. There's one that's just the pot, and there's another one that has a pillar that you can fill with like sphagnum moss for your like crawling plants, right? He's going to send me, he didn't have the right size of that with him for the particular tank I'm doing it on, but he's going to send me one. So I'll be kind of setting up some stuff in my Pleco tank using those, so adding plants immersed grown, kind of similar to what my good friend Jeremy at Aquarium Domain is doing in his 50 bajillion gallon tank instead of my 30 gallon tank. But, small scale. We'll keep it pretty. But I'm going to try my hand at a couple immersed plants and test out the product itself. He does some really interesting testing on it, so we'll save all that for the video, but just something that I really like, because he talked to me when he was in the early planning stages of this, and I thought it was just a genius idea. And now that he has like physical versions, and they've even gone through like a kind of retooling to make it better and more effective throughout the process. So really looking forward to giving that a thorough test in my Pleco tank and seeing what kind of magic those things can do. So with that being said, that is Fishtoberfest. Would I suggest going? Yes. Feel like that's kind of obvious. And part of the reason is just because it is a smaller show, it's really easy to just sit and talk to people. It feels like it's an opportunity to meet several of my friends every year. It's one of the events where I get to sit down with like John Ebsen as an example, or Luke Wang, who's regularly in chat and is from the Sacramento Club. The three of us actually sat down after dinner and had some whiskey in my room for a little bit. We just sat, talked, and sipped on some whiskey in the evening. Would have been better if we had a full big room to do that. Just saying, Fishtoberfest, hospitality room. Maybe don't have to have a lot of stuff provided, or maybe purchasable. What are you whining for? My goodness. Come here. This puppy. She's been losing her mind since I've been working. I'm not home all day. It's like losing her brains if I don't pay attention to her like crazy. You're fine. But yeah. So that's kind of Fishtoberfest. I think it'll be better. The big thing is, like, would it be one of those things that you would travel across the country to? And I would say not yet. Unless you really want to meet a lot of the Northwest folks. Like you wanted to go meet Dr. Mazerall. You wanted to meet me. Potentially see like Alex from Fishery. Danny and Kenny from Danikin Aquatics as examples. And there's a few other like really great small creators that are in the Northwest who that's their kind of their local show. That would be a good reason, because it's so chill. You get lots of time to sit and talk with all of us. But is it something like, say, I keep going to Keystone Clash because just my experience was so good with it, or even Triple Crown, right, when we did that, and apparently there's another Triple Crown coming in 2025. I think it's 2025. Is it as interesting to travel to that one? Probably not yet, but it can be. Mystery Snail Guardian, it's good to see you. Why weren't you there? Where were you? Why didn't you come see me? No, I'm kidding. You usually have a table, but I wish Fishtoberfest did better at showing their vendors more. They never posted a list of vendors anywhere. Actually, that's a great thing. Yeah, and George RB3 George was there. George, good to see you in chat, buddy. It was good to sit down and have dinner with you. It's kind of like I haven't traveled down to the club recently, but it was good to see you there. I think that's one thing that also like Clash does a really good job of is getting the information out there about who's there. That's another opportunity for growth for them, is just one, advertising a bit more, and not necessarily like crazy advertising. You don't have to be Scotty. Like Scotty's an animal when it comes to the amount of advertising and work he does for the Clash. But just even getting potentially getting a number of various FishTube people to talk about them more and talk about the things that are there, and having something that is more forward facing and not just like their club's website. I know it's asking a lot. That's a bit of work, but I think that's an opportunity for growth as well. And they're still figuring stuff out, right? And part of it is the leadership shifts every couple of years, so they kind of have a new group every couple of years trying to figure out what they need to do and how to keep it going and keep improving. Oh my goodness. Do you hear her whining in the background? Do you hear that puppy just like losing her mind? And yet she's just staring at me from the bed like, I don't want to come near you, even though you've reached out and did the thingy like this to show I will pet you if you just come near. It's like, no, I will sit on the bed and whine, Dad. We'll sit on the bed and whine. Come here. She is, I wish I could turn my camera easily, but it's a terrible webcam. She's just sitting on the bed with a big shit-eating grin like, I know what I'm doing. Dogs. What do you do? Yeah, so Alishon, they did kind of, as Scotty is saying, prematurely announce that they're working together to potentially do another Triple Crown, but they haven't officially voted yes, they're doing it. Most likely they will, because it was really beneficial for each of the groups. And from what I've heard, it is going to be in, I think, like Houston or something. I think it's in Texas in like June, which for me is kind of an instant no, because Texas in the summer is not good for me. I had enough trouble dealing with the heat from Kentucky in the Triple Crown. I can't imagine Texas, which is significantly hotter, albeit drier. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, maybe I'll have a reason. I'm sure Gary, if it happens and Angfa is a big portion, or quotation marks, big portion of it, if Angfa is making a showing there, I am sure that Gary Lang will bully me into going. Because Gary loves to bully me into going to things. But it's mostly because we like seeing each other. That's what it comes down to. That's what fish friends are for. We bully each other into going to things. Clash has a great social media person. Is that Stephen P? Or is it Jenna? Oh, man. They're going to do field trips to strip clubs. I mean, I'm sure certain people would appreciate that. I don't care. I'm married. I'm too old to give a dang. But yeah, neither actually. It was sarcasm, Scotty. Sarcasm. All right. I might be wrong in it being Houston. I just remember it being Texas, and naturally my brain goes, well, here's the big ones. Maybe it might have been San Antonio, actually. Maybe it was San Antonio. I don't know. I can't remember. It's not even official yet, so we just got to wait and see what happens. Anyway, at this point, we will open up to questions. Oh, okay. I got one more thing, and while we let questions come in, at Bentley Pascal makes it super easy for me to issue questions, blah, 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 blah. You guys know the rules. One bite, everybody knows the rules, right? But I had 5 different people come up to me at FishtoberFest and tell me that they still use the Danger Noodle towel that they got at the FishtoberFest I spoke at daily. I cannot tell you, knowing the Danger Noodle has passed, and that there were only so many of them, how good it felt to know that people still use that towel every day, and it's held up for 2 years at this point, and it's still going strong in very active fish rooms. Like, one person is Bryce from Pleco Lab, who he had a bunch of screaming deals on Plecos again this year. So yeah, there were some deals. There's some super deals to be had while I was there. I bought all of two things, and one was not alive. I bought a book. I was going to bring it up, but I got here with like 4 minutes before my stream, so I didn't have time to gather the couple of things I wanted to show. But they'll probably be up here in the background next week. But yeah. I have number 13, and I used it today. Thank you, Annette. Make me feel good. What's a big warm feeling in this old heart of mine. And it's gonna be bad news bears whenever I can get the big tank built and just do like 8 bajillion danger noodles. My wife is gonna love it, and I'm probably gonna have to stream or film in front of it regularly so that people can do like loach fart counts and stuff like that. It's gonna be good. Someday I'll get to do it before I'm dead. Oh man. But yeah, if you have questions at Bentley Pasco, we talk about anything. Doesn't necessarily have to be amazing, wonderful places like the Clash or FishtoberFest. It could be about anything. Probably fish related. That's probably the best, but don't ask me about my Seahawks. Oh, that tough game against Detroit last night, man. It was rough. M&T Aquatics, your review on the new AquaClear is spot on. The smaller ones won't fit my 75 or my 95 oceanic tanks. Yeah, there's a number of your larger tanks, especially you get to like the 75 gallons and larger, where they have the thicker rims on a lot of your North American design tanks, not your rimless tanks, where they just don't fit. Now, granted, you can take, and I didn't really talk about this, but it's probably because I might do a video of actually doing this modification, which is rather than cut the rim, you can take a Dremel to that little angle bit and kind of square it off, and it will help fit a number of rims of tanks. Not all. Like a 125 gets actually kind of hard to fit unless you're all the way up on like an AquaClear 110. But you can take a Dremel to it and kind of modify it. But that basically will immediately void your warranty, even though it's the least damaging modification you could possibly do. But it's either that or you have to go through and like start cutting rims on tanks, and that's no fun. I've done it before. I did it on my 90 gallon to make my AquaClear 70s fit, and yeah, not fun. But yeah, for a lot of people, I think you'll end up returning them because they don't fit. And that's just something I think, like, I feel like hang-on backs could have, rather than design for like only certain things, you could realize that like there are plenty of people who like using hang-on backs on bigger tanks, even though it's like not a canister. Like, people just like hang-on backs. So design something that is more adjustable in one way, shape, or form. Like, I think the title does the biggest thing well, which is that bottom screw out adjust that flattens it. Because you could have a rim that is fairly large and kind of slides all over the place, but with that adjustable screw in the bottom, that kind of hooks and forces it to sit in place correctly. It's one of those things where I think just a small amount of forethought on engineering will make it better. Now, granted, it might make your packaging larger or some other blah, blah, blah problem that they're trying to address, but I just think like the positives are worth more if you make them fit a wider range of tanks. I had a comment where somebody was like, well, it's not their fault that you didn't pay attention to the size tank you have and know that you have an abnormal tank, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, so if the fact that it doesn't fit on a standard Aqueon 75, is that still my fault? Literally like one of the most common tanks out there? Pape, what are you getting into? This dog. Shani. I swear, dog, if I have to come over there, I'm not going to be very happy. Give me like 20 more minutes, huh? Dogs. What do you do? Anything for attention. Annette does have a heart. Rules. We don't need those stinking rules. Garage Gills. I have a 135 and a 45 cubish rimless I'm starting up. I'm considering jumping into CO2 thanks to Stephen P. et al. Can you discuss options, components, and manufacturers? Can I? Yes. Will I? Yes. Hey, a little sippy sip there. Okay. So as far as, one of my favorite parts recently I've been testing this, and you've probably seen it in the background of a couple videos. Let me go hunt it down real fast. Puppy, can you be good? I got these, like, 4 in-tank diffusers. I got these little stainless steel ones, and they're just made by El Cheapo Chinese company. There's like 8 million versions of them. However, the one smart thing they do with them, there's a couple different examples of this. They're all at different sizes, but I will get you guys a link. Oh, they changed the way that I get my links, because clearly my Amazon store powers are so important. Do this. Maybe let's put this in the back of it to make the FTC happy. So this design, and actually I should just like show you. I'll aggravate whoever hates looking at my like 8 bajillion tags. But let me make sure this is set up properly. Boom. Okay, there we go. There's that. This guy. So these little ones, they have a natural hook that goes over the top and stays steel rather than running your cable or your line over the top. And then they have a friction fit kind of similar to how all of your like refrigerator water lines work. So you can just open it up, put your tube in, and it friction fits in really, really well. But more importantly, if you look at the disc is a screw-in disc for the diffuser. So what that allows you to do is when these get dirty, you turn it off, you screw out one, you put a clean one in and screw it in, and then that gives you all the time in the world to clean the one that is dirty. And you can rotate them. So you can buy like a pack of 5 extra discs for, I think it's $40. So those are $8 a disc, which is not that bad. Or you buy them for $10 a piece on their own. So if you're using multiple, you would buy a multiple pack, right? And then you just have a bunch of spares lying around. But if you're only using one, you just buy one, right? Because then you have 2 to rotate between. So far in using it, I've liked that quite a lot as far as like an in-tank diffuser rather than like any of the acrylic or glass ones that have the little disc on top. Screw those. Those things suck. They eventually have all sorts of problems, whether it's because they're plastic or acrylic, the diffuser ring just blows off of them and loses its glue or whatever. Those screw-in ones are significantly more durable. They're also like pretty thin and small in their form factor, so you can kind of hide them a lot easier. And if you like the stainless steel look, it does look nice. It looks kind of professional. I personally don't care that much, but I like it more than like the clear plastics. Just personal taste at that point. Now, other than that, like, it depends on the kind of filtration you're going to use. So if you're going to use a canister filter, I would look at something like an inline diffuser or inline reactor, just because what that gives you is significantly better diffusion of the gas into the water column. You know, when we look at those in-tank diffusers, we see that little cloud of bubbles that only diffuses into the water so well. It will increase your CO2, do not get me wrong, but compared to a reactor where the gas is moving one way and the water is constantly moving, effectively speaking, in the opposite direction, it causes better diffusion of gas. And what that means is that you can get a higher part per million of CO2 in your water with less injection of CO2. So as an example, I run about 3 bubbles per second in a 40-gallon breeder with the like in-tank diffuser, and that typically gets me to about 25 parts per million of CO2. Not bad. Usually drop checkers want you to be like 30, 35. Again, low and slow, that's my style. If I was doing a full-on reactor, I would probably only need 1.5 bubbles. Basically like 3 bubbles every 2 seconds. Because the diffusion rate goes significantly higher and you're not wasting some of that gas, which also means that your tank of CO2 is going to last significantly longer. So in the long term, you end up saving more money in the long run. Now, granted, you do have to set a few extra things up. You have to cut some tubing and do all that kind of stuff. It's really not that hard, let's be honest, but it is a touch of extra work. But that only really works if you're using like a canister filter or a sump. If you're using a hang-on back or some kind of other like internal tank filtration, you really can't do that. You have to look at an in-tank diffuser. As far as like other parts are concerned, I generally really like the CO2 Art diffusers at their price point and quality. They're pretty good. I kind of am a little leery of like the F-Zone ones, even though they're cheap. I've seen enough people have problems with them, and similar like cheap CO2 regulators on Amazon. Just ignore them all. If you don't care about budget, GLA Greenleaf Aquariums probably builds the best rate regulator out there. It's built like a freaking tank. It'll last you forever. It's really, really nicely built. It's just god awfully expensive. I mean, where you would spend about $100 for a CO2 Art one, you're going to spend like $400 for a Greenleaf Aquariums. Now, granted, it's going to last you a long time. I have one Greenleaf Aquariums, one that fits 3 individual spouts. It has been running for 7 years at this point, almost 8, and I've never had a single problem with it. It's tack on perfect. It just runs in a way that nothing else does. I used to have a couple of CO2 Arts. Now I'm really only running one, which is my big 75-gallon long in my living room. And I run that at an extremely low amount of CO2. It's actually not even running right now because its tank ran out and it took forever to refill it. So I think it's been not running gas for like 3 months at this point. But when I was using it, it ran like a champion. Like it's a great little regulator. And they're, what's the word I'm looking for? Adaptable ones where it's expandable. Those things run really, really well. Similar to how the Aquarium Co-op designed theirs. They're kind of designed similar to the CO2 Art, although the CO2 Art is built a little bit better, but was more expensive. But of course now Co-op isn't selling their regulator anymore because they had too many of them fail. I'm lucky. Mine was built like a tank and works phenomenally well, but yeah, that just happens. Beyond that, there is, if you were going to go really, really crazy, there's some other options, but I don't think you need to go crazy. So yeah. Hope that helps. It's just a matter of like, when you're looking at CO2, make sure that you understand CO2 is not a catch-all to do everything perfect. It still requires you balancing everything. You just have the capability to consume significantly more nutrients and utilize higher levels of light. But if you're not growing plants that demand that high level of light when CO2 is active, having a much more powerful light will only cause algae to happen more, just like it would without CO2. So make sure that you keep that natural balance going, understanding there's a balance between nutrients, light, and available carbon. That's where CO2 comes in. And you'll do just fine, and it'll have a beautiful tank and be able to enjoy it. CoraWorks, speaking of dremeling, what's your favorite regular tool to use for aquarium stuff? I mean, honestly, probably the thing I use the most is my just my pincets, right? I use those for all sorts of things. I don't even use like scissors or any of my clippers all that often. Like a majority of my plants, I can trim just using my fingernails. But there are certain plants I cannot trim with fingernails, either because of the type of plant they are, and I need to be more precise, or because they're just too tough and I can only apply so much pressure with my nails because I keep them kind of short. But I use my pincets quite often, especially my straight pincets. I love those things. I use them a couple of times a week for various different things, not just purely for planting, but like grabbing little bits of algae or getting pieces of plant matter that have gotten into like the intake of a sponge or a filter, maybe a sponge, but many times it's a powered filter. You know, that's what I use the most. Outside of that, like, I have a really nice, like, fold out box knife that I use for anytime I'm cutting anything, it's like my best friend. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't really use any like super crazy tools. I try to keep my okay. I will. There is one thing that is in my fish room that has been a godsend ever since I got it, and I will link to it. And I'm sorry I didn't say this. I need to say it now, but the link that I gave you earlier and the other link I'm going to give you now, they are a paid link. I am an affiliate of Amazon. I earn a very tiny commission on any purchases that are qualifying made through that link. It is a paid link. Please, FTC, do not fine me. I cannot afford it. Because the smallest fine they do is like $50,000. And yeah, I don't make that much on YouTube. I'm lucky if I make like maybe $500 a month. Hey, oh, Lord. This, and we'll go back and we'll do the whole like window thing. This is like my best friend in my fish room. Now that I think about it, this is the one I have to bring up. Let me make sure this is still. Yeah, okay, you're still doing the right thing. Bonk. This little stupid cart. Because on the bottom shelf, I have my big like spool of airline and a couple other extra things. On the top shelf is where I keep all my fish food and some of my fertilizer. And the middle shelf is a lot of like random accessories. At some point, maybe I might have to like walk through just how I have this cart set up. Because this thing, being a rolling cart, makes it super easy to maneuver it around my fish room. And as whenever I can get to the point of where I get to have my big fish room and really enjoy it, that will be my best friend because we're just like, boop. That's currently unavailable. Sorry about that, but they have like other versions in different colors. It's just the black one that's not available. And they also have versions, I should show this because it's interesting and not what mine does, but is an add-on. They have versions that have like a little kind of pegboard system on the side where you can add extra things to it. So, you know, that's nice. You can get even more storage out of it. But yeah, I bought one of these carts when I was getting kind of frustrated at trying to figure out how to maneuver things around my fish room and consolidate storage, and it has become my best friend. I love that thing to death. And it makes it really easy to keep lots of things organized, although eventually it needs reorganization because I try to pack too many things in one spot when I'm just running and gunning, so to speak, in my fish room. But yeah. Love that thing. That might actually be my favorite tool. Something fishy. I use 2 of those carts. You've one-upped me, sir. I only use 1. Geek Boy, do you have the other half of the internet opened up in the other window? Oh, you don't want to know. You don't want to know. When I used to be working from home, depending on which browser I had, would depend on how many tabs there were. So if you think I have a lot of tabs in that one Chrome window you see, that is nothing. When I used to work from home, my Edge browser, because it allows me to have vertical tabs, had double the number of tabs in it. Because I could just scroll through the list. Well, now it's contained. It's only like 20. I've working in tech, I have become so accustomed to having like a million tabs open in my browsers that I just do it everywhere. And I'm so used to it that I have this like mental cataloging thing built into my brain that just knows where things are, even though all you see is icons. I know what every one of them is. It's kind of psychotic, but it's just how I control chaos. That's the way I want to put it. That's my controlled chaos. Wei Ming, do you breed live food like baby brine shrimp? Currently, no. I used to do baby brine quite regularly when I was raising baby rainbows. I've tried a couple of times to get a continuous colony of brine shrimp going, and just it's really difficult with how soft my water is naturally. And then I inevitably want to do Daphnia at some point. I'm not at a point where I need it. So I'm not putting the effort toward it. Also, like, I want to raise Daphnia in a place that isn't inside my house, and I don't have a good place to do that. It's temperature controlled, because temperature controlling is really, really good for trying to consistently keep a Daphnia colony going. I've had, Daphnia and mosquito larvae and all that kind of stuff in tubs outside. I just don't use them enough to really say that I'm actively doing that. But if I got to a point of where I had a proper dedicated fish room and I was raising more baby fish, I would absolutely be regularly culturing like baby brine shrimp and a number of other foods, just because they're so effective. Green water is actually probably the thing I would cultivate the most. Um, and a lot of that is because I do rainbows, right? And rainbow babies are so small when they start that green water is a phenomenal benefit for raising baby rainbows in, because they have a constant micro food source that they can eat until they hit about that like 3 week to a month mark. And then you start like supplementing with a bunch of baby brine, but you can keep them in that green water that entire time and they'll just keep eating and eating and eating. It's really good for them to grow actually at a significantly faster pace because they have a continuous food source available. It's like a trick that I want to be able to inevitably get to a happy point where I get to use that trick. I hope that makes sense, in the sense of like, right now I just work too much to raise baby rainbows, but if I had the space where I could dedicatedly set up these things, it would become a lot easier to do so. But I'm too nice of a person, and I'm not going to be mean to my mom because I love my mom and make her get all her stuff out of my garage. I joke about it a lot, but every once in a while we talk and we're like, yeah, we got to try and figure that out. And she's like, yeah, I need space at my house too. And we're like, yeah, I know. It's okay. We'll get it. I'm happy where I'm at right now. We'll get there one day. One day. Veritas, have you bred Radnocentris? I personally have not bred rads, but there are a number of locals who have. They're actually, I would argue they're closer to pseudomagills, because Radnocentris babies, when they hatch, are larger than most of your like Melanitania, Glossolepis, and Chalatherina. Radnocentris can basically put, not perfectly in all cases, but most of the time, they can eat baby brine from day one. Where most other true rainbow fish species, because we'll discount pseudomagills are also born at a size where they can eat baby brine right away. But make sure it's newly hatched baby brine, right? There is a difference. They do grow kind of rapidly after they hatch to a certain level of microsiemens is one of the ways, but I'm trying to think of the way that we would microns. Got there. When we're looking at like, say, Sarah's micron as an example as a product, or golden pearls, where they want something that's between 5 and 50 micron in size, where baby brine shrimp, when they're freshly hatched, are actually slightly larger than that. So for most of the big rainbow fish species, because their babies are so small, you can't do baby brine right away. Rads are a different story. Rads are usually big enough. God damn it, Coral. Woo. Oh, no, we're far enough into the stream. Bentley is obsessed with Siemens. Not me. Not me. I'm sure the joke is that's what she said. I don't know. Anyway, rads on the other hand are usually large enough when they start that they can eat baby brine right away, as long as it's fresh hatched. So that's usually within a few hours of it hatching. And depending on how you set it up, that's usually about 36 hours after establishing like your setup. It kind of depends on your personal parameters for hatching, but I've noticed in my fish room, the fresh hatch stage was typically anywhere between about 28 and 36 hours when I was regularly doing brine shrimp in my fish room. But I kept it, I wasn't putting any heat in there. It was just ambient from the room. So it was sitting closer to about like 72 degrees, not as warm as some people will hatch. If you're hatching warmer than that, usually it's about 24 hours. But yeah, hope all that helps. But yeah. Oh, man. Just kind of got to take a breath. Kill me with that one. All right, gang. Let me see. Did I miss anything? Hydroponic aquarium and plants. I joined my local aquarium society board. Do you have any suggestions, as I'm new to this? My aquarium club has been trying to get me to join their board for 5 years at this point, and I have refused to join it the entire time. So much so that I actually receive board emails. I'm on the board email list, despite having never been on the board. I did volunteer for a while as one of our, what we call chairs. So we, all of our different programs at the club, so like our horticulture awards program, our breeders awards program. In my case, I was in charge of the monthly auctions at all our meetings. They include you in the board email list when you choose to chair one of those different programs, because often the board meetings require some reporting on those things, and you fill out this tiny report. It takes you like 5-10 minutes tops. Well, when I stepped down from my position, they just never removed me from the board emails, because they do value my opinion from time to time. And I think they're hoping subtly that maybe I'll actually join the board, but I'm just way too busy for that. And also, I just don't want to deal with politics. But big enough clubs, it gets a little wacky. My advice to you is simple. Do what is right for the members. Every decision you make, you should be asking, is this what is best for the club long-term and for the membership? Because what I've found, at least in talking to a number of different people who have been either on the board or in other clubs, is that some of the board members tend to get into a place where they get stuck in a way of like, this is how we've always done it, so this is the way we should keep doing it. You should constantly be seeking feedback from your membership and asking them what they like and what they don't like about the club, and finding ways to improve it where possible. It's not possible to always improve. That's like the fallacy of modern corporate culture, is that your profit has to always grow. That's bullshit, right? But in the case of an aquarium club, we can always look for an opportunity to improve, even if it's tiny, 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 right? And you could kind of make the joke, going back to like Office Space, is like, ask yourself, is this good for the company? But more importantly, it's one of those things where it's like, is this actually good for the membership? Because as an example, very recently, Master Breeder Dean and I kind of like went on a war with some of the board members of our club to get meetings changed from Tuesday nights to Saturdays, because we knew from talking to a number of other clubs that used to have midweek meetings, when they changed to Saturday or Sunday or even Friday evening, they saw a massive spike in their membership showing up, a big increase in activity. So we lobbied for it and lobbied for it and lobbied for it. And we got one board member on our side, and then they allowed Dean to make a presentation during one of the board meetings. And then they were like, okay, we'll try it. But first we'll put out a poll to all our membership. And clearly, like, they had an overwhelming response of like, yes, please put it on a Saturday. We all work, and you do these in downtown Seattle. It's like traveling to downtown Seattle on a Tuesday night is a freaking nightmare. Not to mention going home afterward. And what we've seen is a drastic increase. But it's like, for the longest time, it was like, well, we've always done them on Tuesdays. And it's always been good for the membership to do on Tuesdays. It's like, well, have you pulled that membership? Because it's changed over the several years that I've been a member of the club, and I think you'll find they might not want to be coming in here on Tuesdays anymore. And turns out when you push the buttons hard enough, right, they find out like, oh yeah, no, this is actually doing really good for the club now that we've made this adjustment. So I would say, just always, whenever you guys make your decisions, and like if you have board meetings and when they're making decisions or they're thinking about things, always, always, always bring that up of like, well, is this in the best interest of the membership? Not us. It should not be in our best interest, even though we're doing all this extra work. It should be in the best interest of the membership. And have we asked the membership for feedback about these things before we enact them, or after we've enacted them, because we might find room to improve? The only other thing I would put out there is, just because eventually every club deals with this problem, you will inevitably have a member of your club who is an absolute pain in the ass. And you might get that one member of the club who seems to be doing everything in their power to try and find a way to destroy the club. Make sure that your club's bylaws, especially if you're like a 501, I think it's C5 or 7, whichever one is the clubs and organizations that are nonprofit, but not like a full-on 501c3 nonprofit organization. This is where like most fish clubs fall into whatever category it is. I can't remember if it's C5 or C7 from a federal tax level, right? But make sure somewhere in your club's bylaws is the ability for your board to revoke a person's membership. Because if they're being hostile, your board should have the ability to revoke their membership. And especially we saw this where a guy was, for like a year, the better part of a year, it drove one of our presidents like freaking crazy. And he's such a great guy. And we talk about it every so often. He was just like, it's part of the reason why he stopped running for board, like higher levels like president and vice president, is because it was driving him nuts dealing with this particular problem. And he's being as cordial as you can be. This guy was like doing all these things, trying to investigate like where all the club's money was and all of this and why we're doing that. And basically trying to threaten legal action that would have destroyed the entire club and would have put the club in a situation. We actually had to meet with a lawyer at one point. My club, not me specifically, I wasn't there, but my club, in that they met with a specific attorney who deals with this, and the attorney gave them advice to basically certain things they needed to do to protect themselves, because if he had enacted any legal action, it would basically force the club to cease and desist all activities until a formal investigation process had occurred, which would take months to do. And even at a small club level, this could, in theory, happen. Will it? Hopefully not. Hopefully you don't have jerks like that, but we did. We're a bigger club, and we have, it's like 400 active members, and even in our inactive members, we have something like 1,600 people that have been or are still on the fringes of being members of the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society. So you inevitably will deal with people like that. There's always some persnickety person in the bunch. You're going to deal with it. One, you cannot let it get to you as a personal attack. And two, your board just has to be omnipresent and thinking about, like, how do we protect the club from a number of different things? And similarly, like, making sure that it requires multiple people to sign off on any board, on any club funds going to something to protect them from some person trying to abscond with it. I mean, like, this is all the nefarious stuff that really sucks to talk about, but it's just things that your board has to do to protect the club, right? It sucks. And if all else fails, reach out to other clubs. Reach out to the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society. Reach out to Maasai. Reach out to the Circle City Aquarium Society, the Sacramento Aquarium Society. Their officers, their board members will help you. We all understand that we all want to make this hobby better, and we want to have good, healthy clubs. Work together. It helps. They will help you. I guarantee you. The board, especially of like the Greater Seattle Aquarium Society, we helped a number of other clubs, whether they were growing or established. Don't be afraid to reach out to them. Yeah, that's it. I probably went way longer than I did. Oh, one last thing. Sorry, I've got one more for you. Make sure you have events that engage your members in a fun way. It doesn't just have to be about the Breeders' Awards program or a Horticulture Awards program, which is two of the most common things, but like an example would be like, we have a yearly holiday party, and it's basically just a big potluck, but we all just get together. We play Fish Show, which is just fish-oriented bingo, which is kind of fun. We give away a few small prizes. We do like a white elephant gift exchange. It's all fish-related, so you have to bring fish things. I have a little like fish-shaped bowl that I received at one of those white elephant gift exchanges as an example. But like, find little things like that. A summer picnic, maybe, whatever, depending on the amount of funds your club has. But even if you make it a potluck, it's just something to get people together to engage and have fun in your hobby. One of the things that we do at our summer picnic, as an example, is we do a plant swap. Kind of like a white elephant, but everybody brings a plant. And then we all take turns. We draw numbers, and you just go in order, and you go to the big table of plants. And you pick one up, and you take it home. And it gives people an opportunity to take something new or interesting home, potentially, or just get another plant that they really like that someone has brought in that little exchange. And it's just fun. It engages us all in some way, shape, or form to continuously participate in multiple ways, build friendships, get an understanding of who our other members are, things like that. I think those are some of the best things that you can do as a club if you're not already doing them to engage your members further. That's all I got for you. That's all I got. All right, gang. I heard that a treasurer of one club ran off with a treasury that it was in Pacific Northwest Club. Yeah, that was one of the old Seattle Aquarium Society. That was, it was like in the 80s or something like that, which is part of why the kind of the old members who were part of the old club and are now part of the current Greater Seattle Aquarium Society have been super tight-fisted about certain things when it comes to like trying not to change stuff because they got really protected and worried about something going wrong again. But thankfully the club's at a really healthy point and they've fixed a lot of those problems because they learned from the mistakes. But yeah. Stuff. Bad actors are out there, sadly, even in the most genial of hobbies. Anyway, gang, I really want to thank you all for being with me tonight. We'll be back next week. I might have to push it toward like 7 my time, so 10 Eastern. We did 6:30, aka 9:30, just because my boss loves to grab me like at the tail end of my day and make me put in another extra half an hour to 45 minutes of work, which is a pain in the butt, but such is the way of my life right now. So yeah, just be on the lookout. We'll do something, and look forward to this week's video. I don't know if I'm going to have the Shrimpy Business tour interview of their new facility edited quite yet, so we might have something else, but maybe I'll get it all done this week. Hopefully, we'll see how much time it takes me to finish editing it. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome. And go to small events. Go to small conventions. They're great. Maybe a Clash. It's like this weekend. You should do it. It's pretty sweet.